Disclaimer: any viewpoints expressed by our characters do not necessarily represent our beliefs.
A hate crime is a crime motivated by prejudice on the basis of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or similar grounds. We believe that there needs to be an increase in hate crime legislation because these unjust crimes are only increasing without proper law enforcement.
It is only fitting that criminals who act based on their own personal bias earn an added penalty in prison. Their prejudices should not be defended as free speech because that will only encourage more hate crimes in the future.
The increase in hate crimes after the spread of COVID-19 was due to heightened racism. It is no coincidence that the numbers rise as belief systems become more prejudiced. These crimes result in greater social damage.
However, while hate crime legislation is an important step toward addressing hate crimes, combating hate crimes also requires addressing the root causes of prejudice, as well as promoting education and awareness.
An approach that combines legal measures with societal efforts is essential for creating lasting change.
Yeah, what's up this? All of these hate crimes in my face wanna shut me up. Why I press the weak that you are warriors? Not a discussion of the crime but the punishment.
Let me tell you about these tragedies. So many people injured cause of these. And about laws some people displeased. We're gonna break it down for you, now listen up.
The Chinese massacre of 1871 was caused by the death of Robert Thompson, a white man, during a crossfire between Chinese men. A non-Asian mob then stormed LA's Chinatown, lynching 15 Chinese, shooting 3, and destroying their property. The charge of manslaughter on the 10 men brought to trial was later dropped. Later, in 1921, Dick Rowland, a black man, was accused of rape by a white girl, and a white mob demanded the police to hand him over, attempting to lynch him. When a group of black veterans gathered to protect him, the white mob burned black neighborhoods, schools, churches, etc. None of the whites were prosecuted. More recently, in 2015, white supremacist Dylan Roof shot and killed 9 African Americans at the Emmanuel African Church in Charleston. He was motivated by previous racist mass shooters, telling the victims, "You are raping our women and taking over the country, and you have to go." The issue of racism rooted in hate crimes continues to be major problems to this day. In 1988, Tommy Trimble and John Griffin, 2 gay men, were assaulted and later shot to death in Dallas, Texas. The perpetrator was sentenced to 30 years in prison instead of life, the reasoning being that the victims would not have been killed if they hadn't been cruising the streets picking up teenage boys. In 1997, a gay nightclub in Midtown Atlanta was bombed, injuring 5 bar patrons. In 2001, 51-year-old transgender rights activist Terry Ann Summers was shot and killed, but the police did not investigate the murder as a hate crime, and no arrests were made. Through her high activism, she was included as a target in anti-LGBTQ hate crime lists.
Offenders in America have various motivations for doing hate crimes as shown by data. Nearly 2/3 of the victims were targeted because of their race, ethnicity, or ancestry. 20% were targeted because of the offender's sexual orientation bias. 13.3% were targeted because of the offender's religious bias. On March 14, 2023, the FBI revealed that hate crimes increased 11.6% in 2021 alone. Also, Blacks and Asians experienced the greatest degree of worry related to racial or ethnic attack.
In 1996, the Church Arson Prevention Act prohibited biased harm done to property. In 2007, President Bush vetoed a bill expanding hate crimes to include sexuality or gender, but this was undone 2 years later by President Obama with the Matthew Shepard and James E. Beard Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. Recently, in 2022, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act made lynching a federal hate crime. All of these laws demonstrate the increasing federal support for hate crime legislation as time goes on. The left often believes in added hate crime legislation because they find that her hate crimes are a horrific violation of human rights and that they should be punished more severely than other crimes. They find the key to solving hate crimes to be both education reform and legislation. While the right often believes in opposing hate crime laws, some conservatives believe that added legislation is redundant compared to other laws doing the same punishments. The right also believes that it is unconstitutional and is violating First Amendment rights of free speech. They also find it to protect minorities and neglect others who are faced with hate. While these are just generalized beliefs of both parties, the stances relate to the core beliefs of each side, where Republicans often prioritize individual rights and freedoms, and liberals often prioritize social justice and equality.
President Joe Biden condemned rising hate crimes against Asian Americans in the wake of the mass shooting in an Atlanta spa that left 8 people dead, including 6 women of Asian descent. Biden said that hate crimes against Asian Americans have been skyrocketing since the coronavirus pandemic, and that the country cannot be silent in the face of the hate and violence. On May 20th, 2021, Biden signed into law the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. This act requires that the hate crime reports include data on protected characteristics, actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. The law also requires that, in coordination with communities, the Attorney General expand public educational campaigns to raise awareness of hate crimes during the COVID-19 pandemic, reach victims, and ensure equal accessibility for people with disabilities.
Rock Springs didn't think I'd be dying, working hard on my job, just my name, do my name. Who'd have thought that all the strikers blamed us mob just cause we're working? Help me now, 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 now.
Purple died. I saw purple in the driveway.
It was definitely blue. She doesn't have any morals. Blue believes in blue lives matter.
Blue lives matter.
But it couldn't have been blue because we were hanging out the whole time.
Then it must have been red, because red keeps pointing fingers. Sus?
But what actually happened?
What really happened was this. Right now, it is 1885 at Rock Springs in Sweetwater County, Wyoming. I, myself, a Chinese miner, did not agree with the white miners that wanted to unionize against the company to get better working conditions. I've traveled so far to gain opportunities in the United States. I could not risk my job for this. Now, naturally, the company decided to allow Chinese workers like me to work in the richest coal seams, and the white workers became enraged at this. A mob attacked me and other Chinese workers at the small Chinatown in Rock Springs, killing 28 and wounding 15. Eventually, the Union Pacific fired 45 of the white miners for their roles in the massacre, but no effective legal action was ever taken against any of the participants.
Okay, so we know that this murder was motivated, but what should the killer have an added punishment because this murder was specifically against Asians? Definitely not. Why would this crime need an added punishment if there were already laws against the crime? There's no need for excess laws specifically adding a punishment for hate. If 2 people die and one died by causes motivated by hate, why should one killer have added punishment?
Green is right, because hate crime legislation threatens the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. It also raises ethical questions on whether some crimes can be worse than others merely because of subjective judgments on motivation. Me personally, I think that there should be added punishment because people in minority groups are at higher risks of facing harm. This lack of protection for minorities is exactly what enables more motivated crimes to occur. The Chinese massacre of 1871 occurred only a few years prior, in retaliation for the shooting of Robert Thompson, a non-Asian mob of about 500 stormed Los Angeles Chinatown and lynched 15 Chinese, fatally shot 3 more, and destroyed Chinese American property. Racial tensions have evolved greatly since then, and the fact that this has occurred once again demonstrates that we need more hate crime legislation. How do we just not vote each other out this way?
Bias, that's giving. But don't kill the living. Laws don't criminalize thought, they punish the guilty, the murderers.
State, local, and federal legislation all across the country aiming to get rid of the hate crimes with longer sentences for criminals. Victimized by violent hate crimes, many projects exposing those times and recline. LGBT people aren't sinners, stop targeting us cause we differ. Now.
Guys, Pink is dead in the yard.
This was definitely motivated by an anti-gay rights belief. But how can we even prove that it was a hate crime? She was literally shot at a gay rights protest.
Well, Pink was accusing Red last round, so it could have been you. But it could be motivated by anything, we don't know.
So then, what actually happened?
This is what actually happened. My name is MS, and I was shot by Malachi Robinson, a 25-year-old, in May 2019 because I'm gay. This violence against the LGBTQ community has increased by 11.6% from 2020 to 2021. Data shows that per 1,000 people, 6.6 violent hate crime victimizations happen for LGBTQ people, rather than 0.6 for non-LGBTQ people. My case is only one of many. For instance, 3 men threw chunks of concrete into a gay bar in Galveston, Texas in 2009. One person who was hit needed 12 staples in his head.
Blue has held supremacist beliefs for quite a while, and we obviously know that this was motivated by hate.
Except we don't, and red is the only one who's been pointing fingers.
Is there any way to determine whether a crime has been motivated by hate or not?
We interviewed Colette Gully, a defense attorney in Alabama, about her views on hate crimes. She says that in order for a person to be charged with a hate crime, their motivation against a qualifying group must be proven. This can be difficult, as getting inside the defendant's head is hard, but not impossible using social media posts and peer input. She thinks hate crime legislation does not need modification, as hate crimes are not especially common and the legislation is not used frequently. We also interviewed Melinda Younga, a prosecuting attorney from Ohio. Similar to Ms. Gully, she says motivation against a certain group must be proven for a person to be charged with a hate crime. She says hate crimes are easiest to prove when there is clear-cut evidence before the crime is committed, but without that evidence, it becomes much more difficult. She says hate crime legislation is necessary despite the argument that it punishes thoughts instead of actions or values some lives over others. Minority groups are singled out and targeted more frequently than others, and they need this extra protection to keep them safe. In her opinion, hate crime legislation doesn't need to be changed because the system already in place works well.
Well, we know that the killer definitely has discriminatory beliefs because not only did she kill a member of the LGBTQ community, she killed a Chinese minor as well. And because of this evidence, I believe that it was Blue that killed him.
Just because I don't like immigrants and gay people doesn't mean I killed them. Hateful thoughts and words towards these groups are not crimes in and of themselves.
But honestly, I'm not sure if I can support Blue anymore. It might have actually been her because she is the most conservative, which means that she has the most nativist and anti-LGBTQ views. And that gives her the greatest motivation to target and murder members of these communities.
You're both wrong to accuse me, but I'm still unsure which of you it is, so I'm skipping the vote this round.
I'm forgiven of the villain and the regretting of the killing of the.
Oh, they be taking all the drugs. Oh, they be picking facts with drugs. Oh, I'm so happy for the love. Oh, I don't care, so what's the cause?
Hey guys, now that the culprit's been caught, where's repercussions? We all think that they killed out of hate, but where's retribution?
Can't be proven to just kill him. What's the reason? Why can't laws address the root and the intentions?
At least she can be locked up guilty from this prosecution.
We are in court now because Red has filed a case against Green, accusing Green of murdering 2 individuals in our community on the basis of racial discrimination as well as anti-LGBTQ sentiments. Prosecution, you may state your case.
The evidence is right here. Green was the only one present at the Rock Springs Massacre in a Kansas City, Missouri public library shooting.
There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Green is the murderer and is motivated by hate for these crimes.
Not every crime committed against a minority group is a hate crime. You must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime because of the victim's race or sexual orientation.
The defendant admitted to being motivated by bias.
Yeah, that's right. Those immigrants are taking our jobs and making it so that we, the original Americans, are getting no wages. And also, homosexuality is plaguing the minds of the younger generation.
What are you doing?
I'm speaking my mind.
There is plenty of evidence to prove Green guilty of murder on the basis of bias. But how should we address the crimes that occurred and prevent them from happening in the future?
I'm urging for a longer sentence for these motivated crimes. Hate crimes are a direct attack on marginalized communities, and harsher penalties will deter future hate crimes. Punishing hate crimes discourages potential perpetrators from acting on their bias. The reoffending rates for prison sentences of a year or less were at 64.5% in the last 3 months of 2016. We must create longer sentences to help end hate crimes.
But laws can only go so far. We've already enacted many laws to prevent and attack hate crimes in the past decades, but has that helped at all? Title I of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, over half a century ago, has promised to secure federal prosecution of anyone who willfully injures, intimidates, or interferes with any person because of his race, color, religion, or national origin. And what did that do?
Hate crime statistics show a rise in the past decade, especially against Asian Americans after the spread of COVID-19.
Bias-motivated crime causes greater psychological damage to victims rather than other crimes and must be punished more severely. Such laws do not criminalize thought, rather they take intent into account. The darker parts of this map are where more hate groups are located per capita and tend to be in areas where there are less laws regarding hate-motivated crime. Longer sentences is the only way.
We have to target this problem at the root, not just the surface. Although law enforcement is important, how will it reach the general public and prevent future crimes from happening? One of the largest gaps in the hate crime response system is that there is a lack of understanding and underreporting of hate crimes, preventing the public from fully addressing the issue. And if there is little demonstration of federal protection and enforcement due to underreporting, there is a higher chance that the perpetrators will view the law as unable or unwilling to prevent the crimes. Protecting the victim's right and safety must come first in order to make a big step towards change.
What do you think?
Green is charged with second-degree murder of 2 individuals. 30 years in prison with an added 10 years because of the Hate Crime Prevention Act passed in 2009. This act criminalizes people who willfully cause bodily injury when a crime is committed because of the victim's actual or perceived race, color, religion, or national origin of any person.
I would like to add that this case is being held in the state of Pennsylvania, which has no laws against crimes towards gay individuals, classifying them as hate crimes.
Court adjourned.